After her recent split, my sister temporarily took up residence in my guest room for a month. The moment she started bringing different men back to the house every single night, I requested that she find somewhere else to live. She then showed me some messages from our parents, explaining how they thought this house belonged to the family. What I ended up doing after that made them wish they'd never said those things. I never anticipated that my sister's relationship ending would result in me being here, typing this all out, and questioning what became of the life I previously had before she moved in. It all began in a seemingly harmless way. My sister, Sarah, had just ended a serious relationship, and she called me to ask if she could temporarily stay at my place, maybe just a month or so. I thought it wouldn't be a huge issue. I understand, you know. Breakups are tough, and sometimes a change of environment is necessary. Our parents were away for a few weeks, and I had an unused guest room just waiting there. So of course I agreed. Initially, things were okay. She was appreciative and didn't need a lot. I started to see, however, that something was a little off. Nothing major, though. Just little details. For example, she'd stay up until very late watching television in the living room, even though I was trying to go to sleep. Or she would leave half-eaten takeout containers scattered everywhere on the kitchen counter. Not a major problem, but when you're used to living alone, you get used to everything being exactly how you prefer it. The initial week went by, and I didn't really think much of it. But then, when the second week arrived, that's when I began to see some things that really bothered me. One night, when I got back from work, I saw Sarah's car parked in the driveway. There's nothing odd about that, right? The car was positioned so that it was blocking a portion of the garage. I thought, all right, perhaps she's in a hurry or maybe she wasn't really paying attention. So I simply moved it without saying anything. Then I went inside and I discovered her not wearing her usual casual clothes, but in a really form-fitting dress, seated on the sofa with some man I didn't know. It threw me for a loop. Sarah and I have never been especially close, but we were family, and I figured we could at the bare minimum be considerate of each other's personal space. I said, "Hey, I wasn't aware you had company." She gave me this sort of smirk and casually stated, "Oh yeah, he's just a friend." Fine, whatever. I'm not the judgmental type, but it felt off. First, the fact that she didn't even bother to introduce him. And second, the whole "he's just a friend" excuse. I could tell from the way they were sitting, practically on top of each other, that there was definitely something more going on. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to cause a disturbance or act like I was some sort of overbearing, controlling person. But the next day, the same guy was there again, and then again the day after that, and then the following day. By the fourth day, I began to feel uneasy. I mean, don't misunderstand me. I don't have a problem with my sister having guests, but it just felt like these guys were constantly around. Like every time I returned home, they were occupying my couch, using a space I hadn't anticipated. I wanted to tell you all about this. It wasn't just the other men, it was her whole energy. I noticed Sarah beginning to leave her belongings all over the place, clothing, makeup, and discarded containers. I discover items like footwear right in the middle of the living room or dirty coffee mugs sitting on various surfaces. It felt like I was inhabiting a chaotic college dormitory, not the calm sanctuary I'd put so much effort into establishing. On one particular evening, I got home from my job later than usual. When I entered the residence, I found Sarah and another man watching a film in the living area. The guy was sprawled out on the sofa in his underwear, while Sarah was reclined with her feet resting in his lap. I paused for a moment, experiencing a surge of unease. It wasn't even the physical contact that bothered me. It was the fact that this was my domain, and I was the one feeling like an outsider in my own place. I attempted to stay composed, but the annoyance was starting to build. I made a noise to get their attention, and both of them turned toward me. "Oh, hi, you're home," Sarah stated without a hint of surprise, like everything was totally okay. "Yep, just arrived back from work," I replied, trying to appear unfazed. However, then I posed the query that had been bothering me for several days. "How long is this going to last?" I said. "I don't object to you being here, but this constant parade of guests is becoming a bit too much. It was supposed to be a short-term arrangement, wasn't it?" Her expression shifted slightly. She sat upright and gave a little shrug. "I'm not certain. I'm still trying to sort things out, you know." I stood there for a moment, trying to understand her words. Something just seemed wrong with her answer. It was like she was evading the question. There was definitely something amiss. I couldn't figure out if she was trying to dodge the topic, or if she honestly didn't see this as a significant issue, but I dropped it for now. Over the next few days, things got even worse. Upon entering the house, I found a different guy hanging around again. I really don't know why it bothered me so much. Possibly it was that these people were consistently present, as if I were a guest in my own place. Perhaps it was because nobody ever checked if I was comfortable with the situation. Or perhaps it was because I wasn't certain whether Sarah was just using my home as a place to stay for a bit, or if she was starting to act like it was her space now, too. I began to feel like I wasn't a resident here anymore. Then, late one evening as I was preparing for bed, Sarah's newest visitor remained quite a bit later than normal. Around 1 a.m., I heard murmuring and giggling coming from the kitchen. I couldn't fall asleep with the disturbance, so eventually I got out of bed and went down the hallway to see what was happening. As I moved past the living room, I noticed Sarah and this man getting pretty intimate. And when I went into the kitchen, they didn't even recognize that I was there. That was it. I realized I couldn't keep tolerating this. I was at the end of my rope. It was only supposed to be a short-term agreement, not a free-for-all. I didn't want to be the one to cause conflict, but I had arrived at the point where I just couldn't take any more. I wasn't going to keep quiet any longer, therefore I took action. I walked into the living room, asked Sarah to join me, and then I said, "You need to go, this is not working." It was only supposed to be for a single month, but it's obvious now that this isn't a short-term situation anymore. You're having men over every night, and it's disrupting my life. This is no longer acceptable. She didn't react well at all. The things she said next, they impacted me even more than I anticipated. But that's when things really started to escalate. Things didn't turn out exactly as I thought they would after I asked Sarah to leave. I had barely finished telling her that her visit was ending when she visibly deflated. And for the very first time, I saw her genuinely, truly furious. Her usual relaxed, uncaring demeanor vanished, and instead there was this intense anger. She didn't yell or scream anything. She was too strategic for that sort of outburst. However, the way her eyes narrowed made me feel like I had just sealed my own fate. "You are seriously kicking me out just like that?" she said, folding her arms. "You can't be so self-centered. You know I'm having a difficult time, correct?" "I'm not being selfish, Sarah," I responded, trying to maintain composure, even though I could feel my irritation growing. "You've overstayed your welcome by a considerable amount, and I'm not okay with the continual parade of random men you've brought here." "It's also my residence, you know," Sarah scoffed, as though I was being ridiculous. "I'm not trying to be difficult. We're just a couple of people living together. Please don't make it seem like I'm hosting a huge social event every single evening. Do you really believe I'm doing this just because it's amusing? I'm still struggling to get over what happened. I'm still dealing with the split. You're my sibling. Shouldn't you be on my side instead of kicking me out?" I tried to keep my tone calm. "I am trying to help you, but it's become too much. This isn't what we talked about. It's not right to me, and I really need to get some personal space back. If you're going to stay here, we need to put some rules in place." She gave me a look like I was the problem. There was a moment of silence, and I almost thought she might actually hear me. But then she stood up, picked up her phone, and went off to her room in a huff. I thought that was the end of it. Honestly, I did, but it wasn't that night. After we ate, when I was relaxing in the living room, I saw something that made my heart sink. My phone vibrated with a notification. My mom had texted me. It wasn't uncommon for her to reach out, but the timing felt off. She generally didn't text this late, and I was about to go to sleep. "Mom, your sister says you're kicking her out. What's happening? You know this house belongs to the family. Don't make things tougher than they have to be." I was puzzled at first. Family property? What did that even mean? I mean, yeah, it was technically our home. There was something precious I felt obligated to defend, no matter the cost. Honestly, a text like that completely caught me off guard. I had no clue that Sarah had immediately run to our folks and shared her version of events. As I reread that message repeatedly, the truth began to dawn on me. My parents were taking her side. Even though they weren't privy to the whole story, it felt like they were casting me as the bad guy in some fictional play. I'm not sure what I actually anticipated when I responded. Maybe I hoped my parents would at least listen to my perspective, or at least appreciate that I'd opened my home to Sarah. But that didn't play out. Instead, the text just became more heated. "Mom, you need to prioritize the family's well-being. She's suffered enough. You can't just throw her out like that. It's her home too." Her home too? Since when did this become her house too? Was I the one completely losing it? Or was my mom completely oblivious to the actual situation? I remained there, fixed on my cell phone. For the first time since this whole situation began, a really significant realization hit me. I wasn't just battling Sarah at that moment. I was taking on my entire family, and it felt like a complete surprise attack. I didn't immediately reply. A portion of me was too shocked to think clearly, but another part of me knew I had to stand firm. If my parents intended to insert themselves into this, I wouldn't just give in easily, so I set my phone aside and took a few deep breaths before typing a response. Me. This is not solely about. Is it okay to have a house that works for everyone, especially for my mom? I feel like I've already given plenty, yet Sarah seems to be taking advantage of the situation. What I want is some consideration in my own house. I don't think it's right that I feel like I'm the bad guy for setting some limits. I'll confess, I was wishing that it would at least help them understand my perspective. But the response I received after that felt like a punch to the gut. Dad, I don't get why you're being so tough on her. You were raised to help your family, not to abandon them when times are hard. You need to do your part and stop making this all about you. That was it. For a second, I couldn't even comprehend what I was hearing. My own father was essentially telling me that I needed to stop making it all about myself. Was it wrong for me to have feelings? Was it selfish to want my house to feel like my safe space again? I felt like I was doing what was logical. Perhaps there was something I was overlooking, but I felt like I was starting to lose control. So I did what anybody feeling this way would do. I called them. It was an uncomfortable discussion. My mom tried to cut me off, reiterating that it was about family and helping Sarah, though I finally got to interject. It's not simply about supporting her, I stated. The issue is that I've been going out of my way to help for 3 weeks, and no one is respecting my space or the rules I put in place. I didn't ask for a chaotic household. This wasn't the deal. I could hear my mom pause and then let out a sigh. We're simply asking you to be sympathetic. My sister is really in need of this right now. I've been patient, but I lost it. Now I'm requesting the same from you. I need some personal space. This whole situation has gone on for far too long. There was a long pause, and then my dad joined in. You should probably think about the fact that she's your sibling and family always comes first, he said. It's not a matter of set guidelines. It's about assisting one another. She's living here too, and you need to find a solution. My spirits plummeted as I heard what they were saying. Essentially, they were saying that, regardless of my discomfort, no matter how much I wanted my personal space, I should just accept it for the sake of family. That's when I realized. This wasn't just an argument with my sister anymore. It was me against them all, but I wasn't going to surrender. Not now, certainly not after everything. If they wanted to treat my house like some sort of free-for-all, then I had some choices to make, and they wouldn't be happy. I'm giving this the final update. I never anticipated the situation getting so heated. When I decided to ask Sarah to leave my home, I truly thought it would be the end of everything, but things didn't play out like that. It transformed into something way bigger, and now it almost feels like I had been backed into a corner where I had no option except to take action. Following the discussion with my parents, I thought my position had been made crystal clear, but the very next, I woke up this morning to text from my mom, which wasn't out of the ordinary. She was just checking in. She was asking me to explain what had gone down. I could tell she was truly worried. However, as the hours passed, it became obvious they were taking Sarah's side no matter what. Then my dad texted something that really got to me. His words were, "Why are you being so difficult about this? Sarah needs assistance and you're making it more challenging. She's your sibling. This is family." That phrase again. Family? I was tired of it being used against me like I was the one who didn't care. I thought, you know what? If they want to act like my feelings are irrelevant, then I'll make them understand precisely how this feels. I hadn't planned any of this, but I started remembering how much my parents had always taken me for granted. How they never really supported me when I was struggling. They always acted as though my requirements came second to everyone else's. So when they gave me that final order, telling me I had to allow Sarah to stay, no matter how inconsiderate she was being, it was like a switch was flipped. I knew I needed to make them feel what it was like to be dismissed, to feel like my own personal limits didn't have any importance. But I didn't want to simply tell them what I thought. I wanted them to truly feel it. The following night, I went into the kitchen to find Sarah there, sitting at the table once more, eating Chinese food and chatting on the phone with somebody. Another guy, naturally. It was all getting to me, but I kept. I'd like to share a story about a situation I encountered. I took a seat facing her, and without a lot of build-up, I told her, "Sarah, you need to gather your things. I've shown a lot of kindness, but this is the end. I'm finished." She didn't even react. She just looked at me for a bit as if she expected me to be the first to look away. After that, she gave a small, smug smile. She said, "You know, you're not even the initial person to tell me to go," while casually removing the condiment packet from the table. I've faced worse. Even though her words hurt, I understood this was the breaking point. I'd given her ample opportunities to treat me with consideration. She had boxed me in, and I was not going to let her prevail. "I'm being serious, Sarah," I stated as I stood up. "You need to leave." She didn't argue. Instead, she picked up her bag and left the house without saying anything further. However, the second she went out the door, I understood that this was far from over. It was no longer just about her. It was about ensuring I wasn't being treated without respect. I couldn't afford to give in now. That evening, I sat down and composed a message to my parents, a message that I knew would shock them. It was a message saying that Sarah is gone. I'm no longer her free place to live, and I'm done being the understanding one. I've established limits, and I want you to follow them. You can either be on my side or keep acting like I'm the villain. The decision is yours. It had expanded past Sarah. I'd reached my breaking point with my parents also. They were so focused on acting like heroes to Sarah that they ignored what I needed. I couldn't care if they... I wasn't angry at them anymore. The more it bounced around in my head, I figured I had to make them wish they'd supported Sarah. I was always giving and they were always taking. It was time for things to change. The answer I got was quicker than I thought it would be. My mom called, and I could tell by the tone of her voice how disapproving she was. "We need to have a talk," she said before I could even greet her. "This has gone too far and we need to fix this." I didn't hold back. "Fix it? How about you finally stand up for me for a change? I'm sick of being second best. It's my place, and I'm sick of everyone acting like I'm invisible." I could hear that she was taken aback. "You're being absurd. Do you realize that? This whole situation was supposed to be about Sarah's health, and now you're just ruining it. You aren't making things any simpler for anyone." It was like something snapped inside me. I was done letting them run over me. "No, what's crazy is that you've been so focused on helping Sarah that you've completely forgotten about me," I snapped back. "You always talk about family, but where was the family when I needed it? You didn't even bother to ask how I was feeling while Sarah was here, being a pain and bringing random men into my home. You didn't even care." There was a pause that stretched out. Then my dad got on the call, his voice cracking. "We didn't realize it had gotten this bad, but you're still being harsh. This isn't how we raised you." "Perhaps you raised me to be too tolerant," I admitted, my voice quivering with anger. "I'm not your plan B any longer. If you want Sarah to continue living here, you can handle the consequences yourselves. I'm finished." The discussion concluded soon afterward, with both of them insisting that I rethink my decision. However, I knew in my heart that I had already come out on top. I was finally managing the circumstance. This was the initial time I was establishing limits that would hold. Then something I hadn't anticipated occurred. Few days later, my mother phoned me, yet her demeanor was unlike anything I'd heard before. It was almost as if she was sorry. "I didn't grasp how much you were enduring," she confessed. "Sarah sent me a text, and I believe she finally understands. We didn't understand things the way you did, and we apologize. This had been dragging on for way too long." The apology felt good, although it wasn't sufficient. I needed them to know that I was not going to be the one that always gave in anymore. I needed them to have the same feeling I had, for all the months of annoyance I had been experiencing. Thus, I did something a little bit spiteful, something I probably shouldn't have, but it felt incredibly gratifying. I got rid of the guest room furniture, that same bed Sarah was using, the desk, the lamp, everything. It wasn't much, but I wanted to make it clear that I was serious. If she was going to treat my house like it was just temporary, then I would ensure it was gone when she needed it again. When Sarah found out, she was enraged. She texted me furious, declaring how I had overstepped. However, I wasn't bothered in the slightest. Things had shifted, and now it was my turn to be in charge. My folks are currently reaching out, attempting to patch things up. But they are smart enough to understand that they can't keep trying to appease everyone at once. They understand that if Sarah attempts anything like that again, I will be the first to bring up the fact that they are the ones behaving disrespectfully. And honestly, it feels amazing. I don't feel bad about it, not at this point.